Hi there, it's Mr. McAuliffe, and welcome to part 2 of Lesson 6.6. And hopefully we can continue with your note-taking sheet and go through and do a couple more examples of graphing. On your note-taking sheet, you have some items listed here. To show all the solutions of a system of linear inequalities, we can use the following steps. And there's 3 steps I just came up with here to help guide you when graphing these. Number 1 is to graph the solutions for each inequality in the system. That's the number 1 thing, is we want to look at the coordinate grid and graph each system on there, including the shading. Number 2 is we look at the shaded regions and see if there's any portions that overlap. Nice point to mention is when shading, try using different colors with each inequality. That'll help make things a little bit easier to determine on your solution. And step 3 is the solutions of the system are represented by the overlapping shaded regions. So where both inequalities are shaded together, that's where we're going to have our solution. So let's take a look at some of the examples we did in part 1. Okay, so we're going to graph this example that we did back in the first part 1, and we're looking at the solution -1, -3, and we're going to see how it tests out. So I'm going to do the first example here in blue ink. Make things a little bit easier to see. So I'll write blue next to it. And I'm going to go and I'm going to find the y-intercept of +1 and then the -3. So it's 1 over and 3 down and 1 over and 3 down, and continue to give myself a guide for making my boundary line. 1 over and 3 up. And I'm going to look at the inequality symbols, see that it's going to be a solid line because it's less than or equal to. So I'm going to try to connect these dots with a solid line. Continue it on. And then I'm going to look to see what direction I shade it. And since y is less than or equal to, it's going to be shaded all on this side. So I'm going to take my ink here and shade that side. Give us something to see here. Okay, and then I'm going to change the color of my ink here for the second line, and let's use green so it's easy to see. And I'm going to start again with my y-intercept of +2, and it's positive 2 over 1 for my slope, so it's 1 over and 2 up, 1 over and 2 up. And I'm going to continue on that one, 1 over and 2 down. Harder to see here. And I'm going to look at my symbol and know that it's a dashed line or a dotted line. It's going to go through that and continue. And then I'm going to shade. It's less than, so that means that I'm going to shade below this line. Oops. Below this line. You're going to see from what we talked about on the previous slide that we're going to get an overlapping region. And this is where I mentioned it's sometimes easier with the colors, because now what we have here is an overlapping region, and that's going to actually be our solution. Anything that's in this region where both the blue and the green that I'm coloring in red here to make it a little bit easier to see. So you start to see, and some students like to do this with shading really dark and really light. Now the key here to remember is we still have our boundary lines in here, and this is a dotted line. So the solution is not on this dotted line. And this is a solid line, so that means that anything that is on this line could also be part of the solution. And so now we can go back and we can look at our original -1, -3 and see that -1, and then if we go 3 down, is going to be somewhere in this range, which would be true. It would make that part of the solution for this inequality, this system of inequalities. So that was the first example. Okay, we're going to take a look at the second example here. I'm going to go back and switch to my blue ink. And we have -1, 5 as our coordinate, and we want to see if that makes this statement true. Now, if you remember, when we tested it, when we plugged it in, we saw that it did not. So let's see how that works on the graph. So I'm going to use my first inequality, and I'm going to start at -1. And I am going to go 1 over and 2 down because it's a negative 2 for my slope. 1 over 2 down, 1 over 2 down, and I'm a 1 over and 2 up. And continue that in the other direction to give me my boundary line. It's less than, so that means it's going to be a dotted line, so I'm going to continue and try to do this with a dotted line right through the region. And then it's shaded less than, so it's going to be everything that's below this region here. Okay, so it kind of gives us an idea of where we're at. And then I'll switch my colors here, go back over to green, and I'll graph this line starting at +3 for my y-intercept, and it's 1 over, 1 up, 1 over, 1 up. Nice and easy to do. Go on the diagonals, gives me my boundary line guide, and it's greater than or equal to, so it's a solid line, so I'm going to connect these dots as best as I can here. Oh, go in this direction. And it's going to be shaded above it, so we can see that we have those shaded. And we'll switch over to red, and again we're going to have this solid line is going to be as part of our answer. This dotted line is also going to be our boundary in which we use, but it does not include those points, and then where they overlap is going to be all of our solution. So all of this region in red from boundary line to boundary line will give us our solution. And the original problem that we used in the first example for part 1 was -1, 5. So if I went over -1 and up 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in this range, we can see that it is a solution for 1, the green inequality, but not for the blue. So it would not be a solution to the set. So by by graphing these, we can see where that would fall and how it is a solution or it is not a solution. In this case, it is not a solution. So that concludes the second part of this lesson on graphing the systems of inequalities.